The rain tapped against the cafe window like an old friend asking to come in. And Emma sat there, staring at her untouched coffee, wondering how her life had become so complicated. 3 different men had walked into her world in the span of 6 months, each offering something she thought she needed, each pulling her heart in a different direction. But sometimes, the heart knows what the mind refuses to accept. The first drops of autumn rain had begun to fall when she met David at the bookstore where she worked part-time. He was everything her practical mind told her she should want: successful, stable, and utterly devoted to her. The second man, Marcus, had swept into her life like a summer storm during her art class, passionate and unpredictable, making her feel alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. And then there was James, her childhood friend who had returned. After years abroad, carrying with him all the tender memories of who she used to be. As Emma lifted her coffee cup with trembling hands, she knew that today would be the day she would have to choose. But what happens when the heart refuses to listen to reason? David Richardson had the kind of smile that made mothers approve and fathers respect. When he first walked into Between the Lines, the cozy bookstore where Emma worked, she noticed how he carefully wiped his feet on the mat despite the dry weather. He was the kind of man who noticed details, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, how she always recommended books based on a person's eyes rather than their words. "I'm looking for something that will make me understand why people fall in love with stories," he had said that first day, his lawyer's precision softening into something more vulnerable. Emma had handed him The Time Traveler's Wife, watching as his strong, practical hands turned the book over carefully. "Love isn't always logical," she had said, not knowing then how prophetic her words would become. For 3 months, David courted her with the patience of a man who had learned to build cases brick by brick. He brought her coffee at exactly 2 p.m. every Wednesday, always remembering that she preferred oat milk. He listened when she talked about her dreams of opening her own gallery, nodding thoughtfully and asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested in her aspirations. "You're good for me," he told her one evening as they walked through the park near her apartment. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, and his hand was warm and steady in hers. "You make me want to be softer, more present." Emma had smiled, feeling safe in a way she hadn't experienced in years. David represented everything she thought she needed: security, respect, a future that made sense. When he kissed her, it was gentle and reverent, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held her too tightly. But safety, Emma was beginning to learn, wasn't the same as passion. Marcus Delacroix appeared in Emma's life like a question mark, painted in bold strokes. She had signed up for the evening art class on a whim, needing something creative to balance the structured routine of her days. Marcus was the instructor, a man whose dark eyes seemed to see colors that didn't exist in anyone else's palette. "Art isn't about perfection," he said during the first class, his slight accent making even the simplest words sound like poetry. "It's about truth. And truth, Mies Amos, is often messy." Emma found herself staying after class, ostensibly to clean her brushes but really to watch Marcus work on his own paintings. His hands moved across the canvas with a confidence that made her breath catch. There was something magnetic about the way he lost himself in his art, as if the rest of the world simply ceased to exist. "You hold your brush like you're afraid. It will bite you," he observed one evening, moving to stand behind her. His presence was warm and electric, and when he placed his hand over hers to guide her stroke, Emma felt something awaken in her that she hadn't even known was sleeping. "I'm not used to making messes," she admitted, aware of how close he was, how his breath stirred the hair at the nape of her neck. "Then you're not really living," Marcus replied, his voice low and intimate. "Beauty comes from chaos, Emma. You Just have to be brave enough to let it happen. Their relationship unfolded like one of his paintings, spontaneous, intense, and impossible to predict. Marcus would text her at midnight, asking her to meet him at an all-night diner to talk about art and life and dreams. He introduced her to wine that tasted like poetry and music that made her want to dance in the rain dot when Marcus kissed her for the first time. It was during a thunderstorm. They had been caught in the downpour after leaving a gallery opening, and instead of running for cover, he had pulled her close and kissed her with a passion that matched the lightning splitting the sky above them. "With you, I feel like I could paint the universe," he whispered against her lips, and Emma believed. Him, that passion she was discovering, could be as destructive as it was intoxicating. James Patterson had been her best friend since they were 7 years old, back when he was the boy who shared his lunch with her when she forgot hers and walked her home when she was afraid of the neighbor's dog. He had left for London right after college, chasing dreams in architecture, and for 5 years, Emma had missed him like a constant ache. She had learned to live with Dot when he walked into Between the Lines on a Tuesday morning in October. Emma dropped the stack of books she was carrying. He looked different, taller somehow, more confident, with laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of experiences she hadn't shared. But his smile was exactly the same, warm and genuine and completely familiar. "Hello, stranger," he said, and Emma felt something in her chest unlock that she hadn't realized was closed. They fell back into their friendship as if no time had passed. But there was something different now. An undercurrent of awareness that hadn't been there before. James had always been handsome in a quiet way. But now Emma found herself noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how his voice had deepened, how he unconsciously touched her arm when he was making a point. "I used to think about you," he admitted one evening as they sat on the pier where they used to fish as children. "In London, when I was designing buildings, I would wonder what you would think of them. You were always my compass, Emma. You kept me grounded even when you were thousands of miles away." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I missed you so much, James. There were so many times I wanted to call you, to tell you about my day or ask your advice about something silly. I'm here now," he said, his hand finding hers. "And I'm not planning to leave again." When James kissed her, it was different from both David's gentle reverence and Marcus's passionate intensity. It was like coming home after a long journey, familiar and new at the same time. It was the kiss of someone who knew her completely and loved her anyway. By November, Emma's life had become a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance and half-truths. She had coffee with David on Wednesday afternoons, spent Thursday evenings painting with Marcus, and met James for their Saturday morning walks. Each man knew about the other's existence, but not the extent of Emma's feelings for them. The deception was eating away at her, but she couldn't bring herself to make a choice. How could she choose between security and passion and love? How could she hurt 2 good men to follow her heart to the third? "You're distracted lately," David observed one Wednesday, his lawyer's instincts picking up on her internal turmoil. "Is everything all right?" Emma stirred her coffee absently, watching the cream swirl into patterns. "Just thinking about the future," she said, which was true enough. "I've been thinking about that too," David said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Emma, I know this might seem sudden, but I've been carrying this around for weeks." He pulled out a small velvet box and Emma's heart stopped. "David, I'm not asking you to answer now," he said quickly, seeing the panic in her eyes. "I just wanted you to know how serious I am about us, about our future together." Emma stared at the ring, a beautiful solitaire that caught the cafe's warm light. It was exactly the kind of ring she had always imagined she would want. Classic, and elegant and safe. But looking at it, all she felt was trapped. That same evening, Marcus called her, his voice excited and urgent. Emma, ma chérie, I have news. There's a gallery in Paris that wants to show my work. It's everything I've been working toward. Marcus, that's wonderful, Emma said, genuinely happy for him even as her heart began to sink. Come with me, he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know it's crazy, but I can't imagine being there without you. We could have a life together, Emma. A real life, full of art and beauty and adventure. Emma closed her eyes, picturing herself in Paris with Marcus, painting in the morning light, living a life that was vibrant and unpredictable and utterly terrifying. The next day, James asked her to meet him at their old spot by the river. He had been quiet all week, and Emma could sense something had shifted between them. I got a job offer, he said without preamble. In Seattle. It's a dream position, designing sustainable housing. But I turned it down. James, why would you do that? Emma asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Because I'm in love with you, he said simply. I have been since we were kids, I think. I just didn't realize it until I came back and saw you again. I don't want to miss my chance this time, Emma. I want to build a life with you. Here, where we both belong. Emma felt her world tilt on its axis. 3 men, 3 different kinds of love. 3 different futures stretching out before her. David offered stability and respect. Marcus promised passion and adventure. James gave her the deep, abiding love that came from truly knowing someone. That night, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She thought about the way David made her feel protected, how Marcus made her feel alive, how James made her feel understood. She thought about the future each of them offered, and slowly, she began to realize that she had been asking herself the wrong question. The question wasn't which man she should choose. The question was which version of herself she wanted to be. With David, she would be safe, respected, cared for. She would have a predictable life, a comfortable future. But would she be happy? Would she be fulfilled? Or would she always wonder what if? With Marcus, she would be challenged, inspired, pushed to be braver and more creative. She would have adventure and passion and art. But would she be secure? Would she be able to handle the uncertainty, the constant change, the intensity of loving? Someone whose emotions were as volatile as his paintings. With James, she would be loved completely, accepted fully, understood deeply. She would have a partner who knew her history, who shared her roots, who would build a life with her brick by brick. But would she be settling? Would she be choosing comfort over growth? As dawn broke over the city, Emma realized that her heart had been trying to tell her something all along. She had been so focused on the choice between the 3 men that she had forgotten to listen to what she actually wanted. She wanted all of it, the security, the passion, the deep love. But more than that, she wanted to be someone who was brave, enough to follow her heart, even when it led her into uncertainty. Emma spent the next week having 3 of the most difficult conversations of her life. She met David at the park where they had walked so many times before. He was waiting for her on their usual bench, and when she sat down beside him, he immediately knew something was wrong. "You're going to say no to the ring," he said, his voice quiet but not surprised. "David, you are such a good man," Emma began, her voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to be cherished, to be respected. Any woman would be lucky to have you, but not you," he said, and there was sadness in his voice but also a kind of understanding. "I'm not the woman you think I am," Emma said. "I'm messier than you realize, more complicated. I need someone who loves me for my contradictions, not despite them." David was quiet for a long moment. I did love you, he said finally. I loved the version of you that I saw, the one that fit into my life so perfectly. But you're right. I was trying to love you into being someone else. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last leaves fall from the trees around them. When David finally stood to leave, he kissed her forehead gently. I hope you find what you're looking for, Emma, he said. And I hope whoever you choose knows how lucky he is. Meeting Marcus was harder, because their relationship had always been built on passion and intensity. She found him in his studio, working on a painting that seemed to capture all the chaos and beauty of a thunderstorm. I'm not coming to Paris. With you, she said without preamble. Marcus's hand stilled on the canvas. Why? He asked, turning to face her. Don't you feel this between us? This fire? I do, Emma said, stepping closer to him. Marcus, you've taught me so much about living fully, about taking risks, about finding beauty in chaos. You've changed me. Then why? His dark eyes were intense, searching her face for answers. Because I realized that I don't want to live my life in reaction to you, Emma said. With you, I'm always either soaring or crashing. I need someone who brings out the best in me without consuming me. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then turned back to his painting. You're afraid, he said. You're choosing safety over truth. No, Emma said firmly. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing to be brave enough to want stability and passion and deep love. I'm choosing to believe that I deserve all of it. Marcus's brush moved across the canvas in a violent streak of red. You'll regret this, he said. You'll spend your life wondering what if. Emma felt tears sting her eyes. Maybe, but I'd rather wonder what if than lose myself trying to keep up with someone else's storms. James was waiting for her at the pier, just as she had asked him to be. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and rose, and Emma felt a deep sense of peace settle over her as she walked toward him. You look like you've made a decision, he said when she reached him. I have, Emma said, taking his hands in hers. James, I need you to know that I love you. Not because you're safe or familiar, but because you see me. All of me. The messy parts and the beautiful parts and everything in between. James's eyes searched her face. And the others? I let them go, Emma said. Not because they weren't good men, but because they weren't the right men for me. You are. James pulled her close, and Emma felt something she hadn't experienced with either David or Marcus. A deep sense of rightness, of coming home to herself. I don't want to be your consolation prize, James said, his voice serious. I want to be your first choice. You are, Emma said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. You always have been. I just had to be brave enough to admit it. 6 months later, Emma stood in the gallery space she had always dreamed of opening. It was small but perfect, with white walls and hardwood floors and windows that let in the most beautiful light. James had helped her design the space, understanding instinctively what she needed. Nervous? He asked, adjusting his tie. Tonight was the opening of her first exhibition, featuring local artists whose work spoke to the heart. Terrified, Emma admitted. What if nobody comes? What if they hate everything? James took her hands, just as he had that day at the pier. Then we'll go home and order pizza and watch terrible movies. And tomorrow we'll try again. That's what partners do. Emma smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of being understood completely. Partners, she repeated. I like the sound of that. As the first guests began to arrive, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. She had needed to love David to understand what security felt like. She had needed to love Marcus to discover her own capacity for passion, but she had needed to love James to understand what it meant to be whole. The gallery filled with people, their voices creating a warm buzz of appreciation and excitement. Emma moved through the crowd, talking about the art, sharing the stories behind each piece. She felt confident and alive, but also grounded in a way she never had before. Near the end of the evening, James found her standing in front of a painting that had particularly moved her, landscape that somehow captured both the wildness of a storm and the peace of a calm harbor. "Regrets?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. Emma leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "None," she said. "I followed my heart, and it led me exactly where I needed to be." As the last guests left and they began to clean up, Emma reflected on the choices that had brought her to this moment. She had thought she needed to choose between 3 different kinds of love, but what she had really needed was to choose herself, to be brave enough to want everything and patient enough to wait for it. A year later, Emma received an invitation to David's wedding. He had met someone who loved his steadiness, who wanted the security and respect he offered. Emma sent her congratulations along with a small painting from her gallery, a peaceful landscape that she thought would suit them. Marcus sent her a postcard from Paris, a reproduction of one of his paintings that had been featured in a prominent gallery. "You were right," he had written on the back. "I needed to learn to love myself before I could love someone else. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth." Emma smiled as she placed the postcard on her desk. She was glad they had. Both found their paths, even if those paths had led them away from each other. That evening, as she and James walked through the park where she had once walked with David, Emma felt the deep contentment that comes from making the right choice. Not the easy choice, or the safe choice, or the passionate choice, but the choice that honored who she truly was. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, noticing her quiet mood. "Just how sometimes the heart knows things the mind hasn't figured out yet," Emma said. "I spent so long thinking I had to choose between different kinds of love, but what I really needed was to choose the love that made me feel most like myself." James stopped walking and turned to face her. "Emma Patterson," he said, and she loved the way her name sounded in his voice. "Will you marry me?" Emma laughed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. To the love that feels like coming home and setting out on an adventure at the same time." As James slipped the ring onto her finger, a unique vintage piece that was nothing like the traditional solitaire David had offered but was perfect for her, Emma knew that she had made the right choice. She had followed her heart, and it had led her to a love that was secure enough to feel safe, passionate enough to keep her growing, and deep enough to last a lifetime. The rain began to fall again, just as it had that day in the cafe when she first realized she would have to choose. But this time, instead of running for cover, Emma and James danced in the rain, their laughter echoing through the park as they celebrated the beginning of their forever. Sometimes Emma thought as James spun her around in the gentle downpour, "The heart knows exactly what it wants. You just have to be brave enough to listen."